Okay, I can from here. I have to see how it does though. But I think we're okay. Anyway, we better go on Facebook too. And no, I never stayed I never stayed awake to see if I snore, but my wife said I don't snore. Pardon me. Here we are. Good morning to you and to you. Uh, excuse me. I'm drinking more water now. I've had people telling me for years I need to drink more water. And I found I've just got it in this plain bottle right now, but at Kroger's, you know, at Kroger's, they've got great flavored water. And it's really causing me to drink more water. So, anyway, we're in part 2 of No Man Has Seen God. That's not the exact statement, although the rest of the title is, or have they? But I'm going to do again what I did on Thursday night. I'm not going to go very long. I'm going to make this into about 4 parts. I'm going to do my best to go slowly and speak as distinctly as I can, knowing the Holy Spirit is the one that has to do the teaching. But I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want to be a hindrance. So I'm going to take this slowly. Is that all right? I'm going to take this slowly. I'm going to take this slowly. And it's not simply, there's more to it than just answering the question, or did they? There's some good, solid, and wonderful and blessed things for us to see and understand in this message that is going to take 4 or 5 different sessions. We'll continue on tonight. And again, we're going to go rather slowly. I'm not going to cover a whole lot, although I do want to rehearse just very quickly. Thursday night, we were in Exodus 33, 18 through 20. And the significant part that I want to review in that passage was, we read these words. God is speaking to Moses, and he says, "You cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live." You cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. Now, there's a particular word in there that is important, and we're going to cover that this morning. John 1:18. No man has seen God at any time except Jesus. 1 John 4:11. No one has seen God at any time. Now I read more than just those statements that I'm giving to you right now on Thursday. I'm just rehearsing those very quickly as we go into the message, or some more of the message today. In 1 Timothy 6:13 through 16, we read that he dwells in unapproachable light, which no man has seen or can see. And then I was in John 6:44 through 46, and the statement that I want to repeat from that passage is, not that anyone has seen the Father except the one who's from God, speaking of Jesus, of course, and Jesus was speaking there. Then we were in John chapter 5, verses 37 and 38. And that part that I want to repeat is, you have neither heard his voice nor seen his form. Excuse me. I've had my ding dong this morning too, and my grape water. And then we were in Deuteronomy. We were in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 32 and 33. And the question was presented there: has anyone seen or done anything great like this, or heard anything like this? Has anyone heard the voice of God speaking in the midst of a fire? The answer, of course, is no. And then we continued a little bit about hearing the voice of God in Deuteronomy 5:24 through 26. Then I read 1 Peter 1:6-9. And in verse 8, we read, though you have not seen him, you love him, speaking of our Lord. And though you do not see him now, but believe in him. And then the last passage that I was in, and I didn't go quite that fast on Thursday night, but I was in 1 John 4:19 and 20. And the last part of verse 20 says, you can't love God whom you have seen. If you don't love brothers and sisters that you can see, how are you going to love the God who you cannot see? So that's a quick rehearsal, but I do want to go back to another place. The very first one that I spoke about was in Exodus 33. So I want you to go with me to Exodus 33. And again, Thursday, I read 18, 19, and 20. We'll cover that again, but I want us to start at Exodus chapter 33, verse 7. Exodus 33, verse 7. And let's see, I'll go down through the end. Exodus 33, beginning at verse 7. Now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, a good distance from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. Now I don't want to get off the subject, but I do need to state here that he's not talking about the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, where the Ark of the Covenant was. It hadn't even been built yet. The tabernacle had not been established. God had given back in about Exodus 24, 25, 26, he'd given the instruction, but it's not till we get to about Exodus 35 that we see it being built. So he has to be probably either speaking of a little tent made special, or it was probably just his own tent that he set outside the camp and used it for meetings. So let's start at Exodus 33:7 again. Now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, a good distance from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. And everyone who sought Yahweh would go out to the tent, which was the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. And it came about, whenever Moses went out to the tent, that all the people would arise and stand, each at the entrance of his own tent, and gaze after Moses until he entered into the tent of meeting. Whenever Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and Yahweh would speak to Moses. Now, that same pillar of cloud that followed him all through the desert, of course. There was a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, as you remember. So 33:10 then, we read, when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would arise and worship, each at the entrance of his tent. Thus Yahweh used to speak to Moses, panim, 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 face to face, just as a man speaks to his friend. Now remember what this message is all about. Thus Yahweh used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man would speak to his friend. When Moses returned to the camp, his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. Verse 12. Then Moses said to Yahweh, see, you say to me, bring up this people, but you yourself have not let me know whom you will send with me. Moreover, you have said, I have known you by name, and you have found favor in my sight. Excuse me, in my sight. Verse 13, now therefore, I say to you, if I have found favor in your sight, now this is Moses speaking to God. Now therefore, I pray if I have found favor in your sight, let me know your ways that I may know you. David wrote a psalm with that statement in it also. Wanted to know God's ways so that he might know God himself better. And here Moses is saying this. Let me know your ways that I may know you, so that I may find favor in your sight. Consider too that this nation is your people, God. They're not my people. They're your people. Verse 14, and God says, and my presence, the word is panim again. Can it be translated presence? It not only can, but in many cases it should be. This panim means face, and panim is face to face. But when we're told to seek God's presence, the word is there, seek his face, to come before him. But again, panim can and should be properly translated many times, depends on the context, as presence. And he said, God said to Moses, verse 14, my presence shall go with you, and I will give you rest. Then he said to him, this is Moses speaking now back to God, if your presence does not go with us, do not lead us up from here. I don't want to go anyplace. I don't want to leave here if you're not going to be with me. Now, by the way, this is some very significant conversation between God and Moses, who are speaking face to face as a man speaks to his friend. Don't forget that statement. We're going to cover that. Maybe we'll get to more of it tonight. In the meantime, we're in verse 16. For how can it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and this people? How's it going to be known that you are with us if you're not with us? How's anyone going to know that we're God's people if the God of us people is not with us? So Moses is saying, don't send us any place if you're not going to go with us. And we want the people to know that you are with us. Verse 16, for how then can it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not by your going with us, so that we, I and your people, may be distinguished from all the other peoples who are upon the face of the earth? Verse 17, Yahweh says to Moses, I will also do this thing which you have spoken. Now listen to that. Yahweh said to Moses, I will also do this thing which you have spoken. Then Moses said, I pray you, show me your glory. Now remember, it says, what we just read is that they've been speaking face to face. We may need to understand that a little bit more. But it says as a friend speaks to a friend. And now Moses is saying to God, I want you to show me your glory. Now that's a significant statement too that we're going to be rehearsing maybe tonight or maybe next Thursday. And he said, I myself, this is God speaking back now to Moses. And God said to Moses, I myself will make my goodness pass before you and will proclaim the name of Yahweh before you, and I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show compassion on whom I show compassion. But he said, God said, but you cannot see my panim. You can't see my face. For no man can see me and live. Now we've narrowed it down a little bit. God's exact statement was, you cannot see my face. You cannot see me in all of my countenance glory, the glory of my countenance, and live. Exodus 33:21. Then Yahweh said, behold, there is a place by me, and you shall stand there on the rock. And it will come about while my glory is passing by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take my hand away, and you shall see my back, or my hinder part, I think King James says, you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. So there's some sense in which, we've got it right here, there's some sense in which Moses has been speaking to God face to face, as a friend would speak face to face, as two friends would speak face to face. God says, you'll see my backside when I pass by you, when I put you in the cleft of the rock. But Moses wanted to see his glory, which has to do with the countenance of his face in all of his glory. And God says, no man can see my face and live. And it's not that if someone got a glance at God's face, God would kill him. That's not the point. The point is, it's so awesome and so powerful. The glory of God, like we read back in 1 Timothy 6:16 this past Thursday. He dwells in unapproachable light. No man can stand that unapproachable light, and they would probably just disintegrate. Certainly, they would die. Now, we've narrowed this down a little bit. Face, face, face. You cannot see my face and live. It's not just that you can't see me, you can't see my face and live. So let's go way back some to Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. I'll begin at verse 7. And by the way, then we're going to go back to Exodus again. Then the eyes of both of them, now, by the way, we're in Exodus 3:7, so you know we're talking about Adam and Eve, of course. Adam and Eve in the garden. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loin coverings. They heard the sound. Remember we talked near the end on Thursday night about hearing God? They heard the sound of Yahweh God walking in the cool, in the garden in the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh God among the trees of the garden. Then Yahweh God called to the man and said to him, where art thou? That's what he said in King James. In New American Standard, he said, where are you? And he said, he being Adam, said, I heard the sound of you. Now the Hebrew word there is kol, which means voice, but can also be translated sound. So he says, I heard the sound, I heard the kol, I heard the sound of the voice of you in the garden, and I was afraid. So I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid myself. And I'm not going to continue reading in Genesis chapter 3, but what I want you to get out of 7, 8, 9, and 10, which we just read, is he said, I heard the sound of you. He said, I was naked. He'd already had a conversation with him. You're not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the midst of the garden. His eyes were opened because they did. Adam and Eve did. He knew he was naked. And it says he hid himself from the presence of God. I was afraid. And so I hid myself. So had he seen God? And if he did, just what did he see? Because it would seem evident that he could not see him in all of his glory unless we assume, and that's what it would have to be, an assumption. We would have to assume that before man fell, he could have seen God in all of his glory. I don't want to talk much about that because I haven't the slightest idea. I don't know. And I don't know that Scripture gives any further light on that. Well, let's go back. So I've posed the question, they heard God, they hid from his presence. They had talked to him before, God had talked to them before. So something's going on. He saw something. Adam and Eve saw something, and they heard the sound. They heard his voice distinctly. Don't eat of that tree. All the other trees you can eat of, but not that one in the middle. So Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Let's go to Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. And let's see. I'm going to read through verse 16. Exodus 3, verse 1. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. Remember, he ended up having to work for him, or did work for him. Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, not quite like Jacob had to, the priest of Midian. And he had led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Then the angel of God, not an angel, the angel, we've talked about this numbers of times. This is pre-incarnate Christ. That means Christ here on the earth, messenger, speaking to people, God appearing in human form, but not being human, not being made of flesh yet. Then the angel of Yahweh appeared to Moses in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. Now, we read just a little bit about that earlier. Remember, has any man seen anything like this before? Has anyone even heard of something like this before? Excuse me. And the answer, of course, was no. Go all the way back to the beginning of history, and the answer is no. So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight. Why isn't the bush being burned up? How is this happening? He didn't get it. Well, verse 4, then we read, when Yahweh saw that he turned aside, when Yahweh saw that Moses turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the burning bush and said, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, I'm right here. Here I am. Then he said to him, do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Now we're going to read that again under other circumstances, but certainly not right now. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Exodus chapter 3, verse 6. He said also, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. There we go. Yahweh said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters. For I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down, God says in verse 8. God says, so I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land. We're beginning to talk a little bit about the Abrahamic covenant, the promised land, the land that flows with milk and honey that God was going to give to his people, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place which the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Amorite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite, where they all live. Now behold, I'm in verse 9. Now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. Now we're getting some good history here and so many lessons that could be spoken here, but we've already seen God and Moses are talking. God is speaking from the midst of the burning bush. Moses hiding his face. He's afraid that he might see God. He might look at him, and he's afraid he would die. So on with what we're talking about right now. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? I'm a nothing. They don't even like me anymore, God. And he said, certainly I will be with you. And this shall be the sign to you that it is I who sent to you. When you have brought this people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Then Moses said to God, behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. Now they may say, Mashem, what's his name? What shall I say to them? And God said, we're in Exodus 3:14, 14 and 15 are important verses. God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent you. God furthermore said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is my memorial name for all generations. And if I had a chalkboard right now, I would show you I am who I am in Hebrew, and I would show you Yud He Vav He, and we'd have a whole lesson just on that. For now, we'll take what we have here in English and be satisfied. We're going to finish up with verse 16, then we're going to go to chapter 4. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying. That's significant too, because they knew that God had appeared to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And Moses is saying, Yahweh God has also appeared to me. And so he says, he's appeared to me saying, I am indeed concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt. God is expressing his love for the people through Moses. I've seen your affliction. I've heard your cry. I care about you. I love you. I'm sending Moses to lead you out of all of this mess and the awfulness which you have been enduring. Go with me to chapter 4, if you would, and we'll just read 5 verses here. Exodus chapter 4, Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. Then Moses said, well, what if they don't believe me or they won't listen to what I say? For they may say, Yahweh hasn't appeared to you. Yahweh appeared to Abraham and our fathers Isaac and Jacob also, but he hasn't appeared to you. Well, Yahweh said to him, what's that in your hand? And Moses said, it's a staff. And so Yahweh said to him, well, throw it down on the ground. Now here's more conversation between God and Moses. Throw it to the ground. So he threw it to the ground and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it. Now, by the way, let's say something really good about Moses here. God said, throw it to the ground, and he threw it to the ground immediately. He didn't say why. And it's a good thing that he did, huh? Moses got scared. Verse 4, but Yahweh said to Moses, stretch out your hand and grasp it, the serpent, by its tail. So he stretched out his hand. He's obeying God again. He stretched out his hand and he took the serpent by the tail. He caught it. And all of a sudden it was the staff again in his hand. And so all of that was done that they may believe that Yahweh, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Now, I think I'm going to stop there. No. Let's do one more. What time is it? Just 11:30. Just one more, okay? Then we'll pick up either in Revelation 1 or someplace this evening. By God's grace, I'll be right here at 6:30 this evening. But one more passage that's kind of a segue to what we'll be going into tonight, explaining a little bit more of what we've heard today, this morning, and going on from there. But Isaiah chapter 6, I want to read about 8 verses from Isaiah chapter, and that's a well-known passage. Every Christian that's been a Christian any time at all surely knows about, they do know about Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne. Now hold it. Isaiah is saying, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and exalted, or lofty and exalted, with the train of his temple, with the train of his robe, filling the temple. Seraphim, which was is a caste of angelic beings higher than cherubim. Seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, each of these seraphim. 2 wings covering his face. With 2 he covered his feet. And 2 wings, that makes 6, he used to fly. And one called to another and said, Holy, 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 Yahweh of hosts, Yahweh of armies, hosts, armies. Holy, 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 Yahweh of armies. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the fountains of the thresholds trembled at the voice of him who called out while the temple was filling with smoke. Verse 5, then I said, woe is me. Isaiah says, woe is me. Woe is me. I'm ruined. I've seen God. I've seen God. I've seen him here in his glory, high and lifted up. Woe is me. I'm ruined. And then he speaks about his own lips after hearing the seraphim crying out, holy, holy, holy. And Isaiah says, I'm done for. I'm a ruined man. Because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. and realizing just how unclean a man that he was and the things that had proceeded from his mouth for who knows how long. Seeing what he saw, realizing himself and the people that he was living in the midst of. And it all came about, this realization has come about because my eyes have seen the King, Yahweh of hosts. You get a glimpse of God, not even all of his glory, not even all of his face, that unapproachable light, that glory that if a man saw it, he would be dead instantly, maybe disintegrated. But you get a little glimpse of God and you know it's God. And you feel ruined. And it makes us want to fall on our face, on our own panim, and cry out, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, if we dare even speak. But we might not be able to not say, holy, holy, holy. Well, verse 6, then one of the seraphim flew to me, Isaiah says, then one of these angelic beings used two of his wings to fly. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar. The altar, we'll talk more about that in another time, but how awesome, which he had taken from the altar with tongs. And with this hot coal, he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity, the iniquity of your lips, your unclean mouth, your unclean tongue, it's been taken away, and your sin is forgiven. The last verse I'm going to read then here this morning, verse 8, Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. Then I heard the voice of Yahweh, seen him, now he's hearing him. Then I heard the voice of Yahweh saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Then Isaiah, following the coal by the seraphim, the coal having touched his lips and his iniquity and the impurity of his lips being forgiven. Here's the voice of God. Here's what he says. And what does Isaiah say? He speaks up now. Here I am. Send me. Here I am. Send me. Oh, that God would care for our lips. James says that from pouring forth from our lips comes bitter water and sweet water. And he said it ought not to be. These lips, this voice box, these lips, this tongue that we use to praise God and worship him and proclaim his glories and proclaim his gospel, to use these lips for foul language, for mean things, for hateful things. He says that ought not to be. And Isaiah realized he's a man of unclean lips, seeing the glory of God, seeing God high and lifted up, and the temple filled with the train of his robe, his righteousness. Dear God, how could I say anything? I'm a ruined man. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live in the midst of unclean-lipped people. We need to be very careful about this. I've gone from teaching to a little bit of preaching here, but I'll be honest with you. I'll take a moment before I sign off here for this morning. with plans by God's grace to be back here at 6:30 this evening, but I'm a little appalled. Sometimes I'm greatly appalled at some of the language that come from Christians. It seems like there's been a downgrading in my lifetime of the things that come. I'm not talking about the world and the language that they use. I'm talking about Christians, even pastors. I've been in a meeting in the last month, and I heard a pastor using language I thought, and the people that were there just laughed. It's not like they were appalled, but they just kind of laughed. We need to be careful, and not just bad words, naughty words, but mean words, offensive words, how we speak to our elders, how we speak to those in authority. We need to take care of this. I like what I heard Jack Hyles, one of my favorite preachers. He went to be with the Lord close to 20 years ago. But he said, when I got saved, my eyes got saved, and my lips got saved, and my hands, that he went on down. This should get saved. And does God say this or not? That out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Our hearts need to be cleansed. When our hearts are cleansed, that bad language and mean stuff is not going to come. That doesn't mean that the flesh isn't going to take a strong hold there for a second or two, but it ought not to last. Greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. What is all this about? Has any man seen God? No man can see God and live. Or can they? There's some that say they have, and we've gone over some things this morning. We will continue with part 3 by God's grace tonight at about 6:30 right here on Facebook and YouTube. And right here, of course. Okay, I've said goodbye to them. I'll say goodbye to you.